Hey there, welcome. This is the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let's go. Welcome to the Thursday edition. It is Thursday, right? Nod Thursday? Thursday? Okay. Should check my phone. I had a whole show planned for you, and then someone had to go and die on us. O.J. Simpson passes away, and I know it's tacky, and it's a bit morbid to celebrate the death of another human being, because even with all his flaws, he was one of God's children and whatever, but kind of nice, isn't it? I think I'm enjoying this. I don't know why. I'm happy. I know why. It's because for the last 30 years, this guy has escaped justice right in front of God and everybody, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. You don't want to live in a world where murderers can run free. But that really upends the order of my show, because now I want to start with that. I want to start with talking about O.J. Simpson. So let's bring in Robert Thompson. Robert Thompson's professor of pop culture at Syracuse University. Robert Thompson, why is this O.J. story and storyline so important 30 years later?
Well, it changed a lot of things. I mean, it wasn't like it was the first time we had wall-to-wall coverage. We had that for 4 days back in 1963 with JFK's assassination. And it wasn't even the first big trial in the cable era. The Menendez trial in 93, Rodney King, I think a year before that, right, in 92?
Yes, right.
So we'd had all that stuff before. But this was something on a whole new level. I mean, not only the celebrity, this guy who had already been a huge football star, big athlete, not only collegiate but professional as well, and then made the effortless transition to being a successful actor and in commercials. He was in Roots, one of the most important television series, one of the most popular ever made, and Naked Gun and all of that. And then we hear this story, and then everything gets so bizarre. The Bronco chase, the people, over the overpasses. It took him forever to get out of the car, and then that trial, which kind of surprised everybody. But that was just the beginning. Then we had that book, If I Did It, which then became I Did It. And then finally, Simpson gets incarcerated on this bizarre sports memorabilia charge. So on one level, it's a pretty compelling story. But on another, it was really, it changed the way, I mean, all these networks and places like Court TV, but also major networks kind of figured out how they were going to operate in the world where one single story could completely take over, the culture. And that's exactly what this was for over a year between the Bronco chase and the final verdict.
One thing I feel like is a good job of mine is to explain to people who are significantly younger than us, who didn't experience it. Now, the people who are a little bit older than me, they knew him in his original form as the football player. By the time I came around, right, I never saw O.J. Simpson run the rock. I never saw him play football. So for me, he was that guy that used to play football that shows up in all these shows, and he's a Naked Gun, and he's a funny guy, and he's in all these commercials, and he does commentary with sports sometimes. And he was a really, really likable guy. Like I don't want to say like Bill Cosby, but maybe that is a good comparison. Bill Cosby was America's dad. All of America seemed to like OJ until this happened, and then half of America stopped liking it, and I don't know if it's half, but there's a chunk of America that still supported him, and it really bothered me because a lot of that was on racial lines.
Well, and I think one of the places and I think that confused a lot of people, because it was, I don't know if we should come right out and say it, but I think most people, it was very clear that he did it.
Yes.
But there were all these other things going on, and one of the best places to get an understanding of that. And I thought I knew pretty much everything about this case. I was already teaching here at Syracuse when it happened. Matter of fact, I remember there weren't that many TVs in the building, and when the verdict came out, I had people lined up outside my office to hear it. But in 2016, ESPN, as part of 30 for 30 series, which is some of the most wonderful documentaries made, they did a 5-part, 7.5-hour thing called O.J. Simpson Made in America. And it starts way back with the Rodney King attack and the trial there in Los Angeles and the response in L.A. to that, tying that into then kind of the second act with his O.J. And I would recommend to anybody who was kind of confused to how this whole thing went down, or especially to people who weren't around for it, that is a really fine way to get a sense of how it happened, why it happened, the whole important consciousness raising with regards to all kinds of things. And not only, I think the best documentary that ESPN ever did with that 30 for 30, I think it's one of the best documentaries ever made on any subject.
Wow. Look. That's the perfect context to put it in, Robert. You're right. This had echoes of Rodney King, where the Black Americans and sympathetic white Americans felt like that Rodney King got the short end of the stick in that trial. Pun totally intended on that. And they thought, well, this is just more example that we live in a country that will discriminate against you based solely on your race, and you can get away with beating the crap out of a black guy if you're a white guy, and this country doesn't care. And this seemed to be sort of their answer for that, their retribution for that. Like, we owed them one.
Well, it was on the simplest level. That is, I think, kind of what was going on. But there was so much. I don't know if you remember Mark Furman, who was the L.A. cop that was very much part of the testimony in the O.J. trial, and he turned out that he'd been lying about using the N-word, all this kind of stuff, and it exposed all of these. When I was growing up, my understanding of the L.A. police force was a show called Chips. You remember that?
I thought that was a documentary. Yeah, Ponch.
Yeah, right. There
Ponch
you
and John.
Go. Well, you probably weren't alone in that. And of course, the O.J. Trial. Further, and certainly the Rodney King thing exposes as well, but the O.J. trial further exposes the fact that the relationship between police and especially the black community, but poor communities, people who have not got a lot of political power and stuff, was nothing like we would see in Chips or T.J. Hooker or any of those kinds of things. And that's why it makes this kind of, you could argue that there is a progression from the Rodney King trial to the Derek Chauvin trial via the O.J. Simpson trial as part of a very large kind of Uber story.
All right, Professor Robert Thompson, you're doing great, but we got to take a break. Can you stick with me for another segment?
Sure.
Okay. Robert Thompson, professor of pop culture, Syracuse University. We'll continue talking about the O.J. case next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now 93.3 FM, WBAP. O.J. Simpson dies. We're going to talk about it on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Thank you very much for hanging through the break. This is Robert Thompson. He's a professor at Syracuse talking about the O.J. situation. And so this is something I like to talk to older people about because you knew more of the context when this was happening the first time around. So O.J. gets in trouble. We have the chase. The trial starts. This is one of those moments where a lot of people remember where they were when they heard the verdict. Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I remember where I was when I heard the verdict. I think I even more remember, however, when the Bronco chase was going on. That was the sort of the downbeat of this story. We had heard that O.J.'s former wife and her companion had been murdered, and we'd heard that O.J. was, surrounding that story. But when the news broke that the police were chasing him, put that in quotation marks, down an L.A. freeway, and it was so slow, 30 miles an hour or 33 miles an hour, that people had time to get over onto the overpasses with signs for O.J. and everything. It turned, clearly this was a double homicide, a huge tragedy, but the whole thing became this almost comic, sort of bizarre burlesque. Then they finally get into the driveway, And hours pass before Dan Rather announces that O.J. Simpson has been arrested. It, in fact, wasn't O.J. that got out of the Bronco. And finally, that chapter closes. But it was just such a weird... the phrase low-speed chase became part of the American vernacular. And then even weirder, comedians went crazy with this. I mean, this is a pretty serious story, a double murder. And Jay Leno on The Tonight Show had the Dancing Itos, a chorus line of people dressed as the judge of the trial.
Right.
Constant, jokes made. Saturday Night Live went crazy with this over the many months that the story went. Even Seinfeld, remember that lawyer on Seinfeld that was based on Johnny
Cochran,
yeah. Yeah. What was his name again on Seinfeld? I forget.
I don't remember, but I can look it up real quick.
But anyway, so this whole thing became so much more than just the trial. And, in the trial, I think a lot of people learned, again, back then, most of what we learned about what went on in the courtroom was, the People's Court with Judge Wapner or L.A. Law or Perry Mason back further than that. And just the way in which the wheels of justice ground away so slowly. A lot of people got a big education watching what we called a media circus, but it was a lot of important stuff discussed during the course of that trial.
Okay, first his name was Jackie Childs.
Yes, Jackie Childs.
But I think one of the ways that this case and this whole storyline should have or could have brought America together is that I thought this was finally a good example that shows a black man can get away with murder because, throughout our history, white people have gotten away with injustices just because they have money or maybe there was some sort of racial bias in the jury, like in To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever. But this sort of was the opposite of To Kill a Mockingbird. And it showed that, sure, there's still injustice in this country. There's still shortcomings in our justice system, but at least it's not based on your skin color anymore. Now it's just based on your wealth. I think this was a good sign that America was not as racist as previously thought.
Well, I don't know if I'd read it that way. I mean, the whole idea that you can get away with murder is a bad way to solve the problem that had gone back even further, and that we would then continue to see played out especially as cell phones became available and more people could now record stuff that was going on, especially in these various cities like Los Angeles and its environs. There was, I guess, a sense of dramatic in a fiction. There was a sense of poetic justice done. But I think, in the end, it certainly didn't. This trial raised a lot of consciousnesses, as I think it actually did make some law enforcement more conscious of some, if nothing else, how the chain of evidence was messed up during that. But I'm not sure I would give it credit for doing too much in the grand scheme of justice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I walk down dark paths, you don't have to go with me. You can keep your shoes clean. But it's just so weird because he was thought of as such a nice guy. And maybe he was a nice guy, aside from, the murdering and the armed robbery. But, I mean, is it possible that, when we see these other people on TV, when they live next to a serial killer, he seemed like the nicest guy. I had no idea. I think all of America felt like that for a little bit.
Well, and I think that's probably true of, I mean, you're right. How often do you hear an interview of the neighbor of the person who just did something horrible say just that? Oh, they always seemed like they were nice to me. I mean, and we're finding out more and more about this as more and more things come to light, that really bad people can do really good things and make great music and star in great programs. I don't know if you've been following that documentary about Nickelodeon in the 90s.
Oh, I watched the whole thing. It's terrible, Robert.
Here again, a place that you expected, all these people grew up with what they thought was this children's whatever programming, and you turn over that rock and there's all kinds of maggots under there.
It's a complex world we live in. I mean, from Michael Jackson to O.J. Simpson to Nickelodeon to that Jimmy Savile guy in the UK. That was the worst documentary I've seen in my life. Thank you very much for hanging out with the extra segment there. This is Professor Robert Thompson from Syracuse. I appreciate you taking time on the James Show.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, this is such landmark story, and I think young people might not understand why this is such a landmark story. Yeah, some football player went crazy and killed his wife, and he got off because, paid some good lawyers. Man, it was huge. Okay, so when the Bronco chase happened, I was in high school. I was actually at my friend Jeff Mullen's house, and we were walking through his garage. We had been playing basketball in his driveway, and we were going to go to Jeff's house, the other Jeff's house. And that was on the TV. What's going on? Oh, there's a police chase, live police chase. Oh, a car chase. And they're like, well, no, it's not like that. Like anyone's going to wreck. They're going like 35 miles an hour. And it's OJ? Like from Naked Gun? Yeah. What'd he do? I think he killed his wife. Ooh, he's going to be in trouble. And then we left. It wasn't that big of a deal. Now, by the time the case came down, I remember where I was for that. I played soccer at ETBU. And if we didn't have a far, far away game, like if it was someplace close, like within an hour, we would get in those church vans. There was 2 church vans that would hold the whole team. We were in those, and we were about to leave the parking lot of ETBU, and we made them stop and turn up the radio so we could hear the verdict. That's where I was. I remember. There's not a whole lot of things I remember, like to the letter, to the T of where you were, but this is one of them. Do you remember where you were? And oh man, there was some guy that called in the Casey Bartholomew show that said OJ was innocent. I want to talk to you. Do you think OJ was innocent? Please call in 800-288-9227. You can say mean things about me. Just don't cuss. 800-288-9227. This is the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there. Welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM. Well, someone got a new member. I don't know if it was heaven or hell, but I think most of us are leaning toward OJ Simpson went to hell. OJ Simpson passed away. His family reports that he died of cancer at 76. For a lot of people, that's 30 years longer than he deserved. What do you think? Is this guy for real? We have someone who thinks OJ was innocent? This will be great. I'm glad you called. Malachi, Fort Worth, thanks for calling the James Show.
How you doing?
So you think OJ was innocent?
I do.
Okay.
There's been books that were written. Jason Simpson, who is OJ Simpson's son, had a long bout with mental illness. He also had a noted affliction. I'm not sure.
Affliction. There's an L in there, but we know what you're saying. Keep going.
Affliction. There you go. He also, the year previous to the murders, had enrolled in culinary school, which they traced back 5 knives that would have been exact measurements to the knives done the murder that they were found. And there's a possibility that O.J. Simpson was guilty of nothing but protecting his son. And I think if people read the evidence that was come out about Jason Simpson and didn't have such a closed mind about it, I think maybe they might change their tune a little bit.
So that makes this
reading all the things, I think that he was guilty of being a very protective father.
Right, and so
the rap for his son.
He didn't want to exonerate himself because that would put his son in jail. So he has to play this sort of tightrope game between, I don't know who it is. We may never know. I'm certainly going to try and find him, all to protect his son. That sounds like the most likely excuse that he would be innocent. I'm still not buying it though. Like, did you ever see the Dave Chappelle skit where he was a juror for O.J. Simpson? Did you ever see that?
I did.
Yeah. No, well, let me play that for everybody. All right. Well, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. I'm going to play it for everyone else, though, because I was sort of like Malachi. I was kind of on the fence, partially because he seemed like such a nice guy. And in interviews, and you talk to coworkers that he had, everyone says he's great. And you can kind of feel from people's aura whether or not or you think that you can, whether or not they're a mass murderer, But when I saw this O.J. Simpson skit on the Chappelle Show, that's the last time I had any doubt.
But Mr. Chappelle, what if I told you that we had DNA evidence linking Mr. Simpson to the scene of the crime?
Then I'd have to ask you where you found it.
In his bedroom, at the crime scene, and in his car.
In the car?
Right in his car.
Damn. In the bedroom, too?
In the bedroom.
Damn. Damn. Then I'd probably just ask you, how'd they find it?
The police found a bloody glove on OJ's property.
Sir, I'm not impressed, all right? What black man don't have some bloody gloves on his property? I got one right here.
Detective Mark Furman was one of the lead detectives on the case.
Furman. It's a racist. It's a racist name. Furman. Was he the Fuhrer, German? Herman? German? Sound a little familiar to you? I'm sorry, sir, but he probably says a lot with a name like that.
I can't comment.
I bet you can't. But as a person that says a lot, trust me, that says all the time.
Mr. Chappelle, are you suggesting that because one of the detectives is a possible racist, and because there may have been some minor oversights in the investigation, that it completely lets OJ off the hook?
Exactamundo. The defense rests, sir.
Mr. Chappelle.
No further questions.
Will you at least admit that OJ more than likely killed his wife?
Sir, my blackness will not permit me to make a statement like that.
Oh, man, and that's so brilliant because it's so true. All of that. That's an amazing skit. Sometimes you don't even have to write punchlines. You could just rephrase what's happening on TV. Back to the phones we go. There we go. This is Buck in Oklahoma. You're on the James Show, 8:20 a.m., now 93.3 FM WBAP.
Yeah, hey James, enjoy the show. I'm with you. He probably is guilty. I don't, I figure he is. But my deal is, we're going to question all the juries. How many innocent people is in the pen? And you got to pick one side or the other. Is the jury honest or are they not? I mean, what do you do?
Well, the jury's not like a monolithic block. Different juries have different characteristics. Some of them are honest.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them are dishonest. Some of them are racist and pro-white. Some of them are pro-black. Some of them are dumb.
I've heard talk show guys all day today. They're like, no, there's no innocent people in prison hardly, but then you turn around and say, well, this guy is guilty when they said he's not guilty.
Well, that's the scariest part is if you're arranging society, it would be far better for 10 guilty people to walk free than it would be for one innocent person to be punished. And for me,
not for the innocent person.
No. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Let's not let an innocent person be punished. So if we are erring on the side of caution for not sending people to jail, I'm kind of okay with that. I doubt that's what was going on here, but
right.
The jury system, we're supposed to have a mixed bag in there. We're supposed to have dumb people in there. You're supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers. And
right.
Man, it just seems so weird that you couldn't convince these people that he was guilty with all that evidence. And then again, lawyers have tried to explain to me, and I don't know enough to understand it all, that, well, a lot of that evidence was withheld, or the jury didn't get to hear about so much of the stuff that you've heard about. And so now we have an uninformed jury. So now what we really have is the chicanery comes with the tricks that lawyers can pull. And so that gives rich people a distinct advantage over poor people. And what do you do about that? I don't know. I
totally agree. It also gives the advantage to lawyers against poor people who can't afford a good lawyer, because they don't have that representation of a rich lawyer. So
well, yeah, and public defenders, you're doing God's work out there, but you just don't have the resources some of these big guys have. So we got to watch it all firsthand. Thanks for calling in from Oklahoma. Are you in Oklahoma now?
I am.
How are you listening? Are you listening at the WBAP app?
No, 820 WBAP on the AM.
Oh, it reaches up there. Fantastic. Must be a good day.
Yeah, and in certain places, it's pretty good.
Thanks for calling, Buck. All right. This is the James Show. Coming up next, there's sort of a trend. People are saying that you can lose a whole bunch of weight if you just drink a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar before you eat. I'm going to talk to a holistic nutritionist and try and get to the bottom of this next on the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.